Hey guys, let's try this again live from the Shackle Lodge barn. Here's one of our youngest little chickies, and probably the most friendly too. You may hear goats in the back jumping around trying to break air compressors and whatnot. I just wanted to get back to what we were talking about yesterday because I know I won't be able to cover enough. Never can on Palm Sunday or Easter Sunday. So real quick, I want to walk us through a little bit of Mark, the gospel writer Mark, and his version of the events leading up to Palm Sunday, because he does something nobody else does. So Mark actually has Jesus set up Palm Sunday. So Jesus, in Matthew, you read Matthew, and in the book of Matthew, Jesus is fulfilling prophecies unintentionally. I mean, intentionally, in Matthew's opinion, from the divine. But Jesus, as a human, couldn't have planned where he's going to be born, who he's going to be born to, things like that. But in the book of Mark, you have Jesus actually intentionally fulfilling prophecy. He's saying something. And so Mark's going to use this time. So I'm just going to run through these real quick. The book of Ezekiel is a prophet, long time before Mark ever wrote, long time before Jesus ever walked on the earth. Ezekiel says that he saw God's glory in a vision leave through the temple, through the east gate, and go up through the Mount of Olives towards Bethany. Ezekiel 16, he writes about how far the Israelite people had gotten from God's intent for them. God's intent, of course, for the Israelites was to be a blessing, to be blessed by God, and then to pour that blessing out liberally, generously on people. That was God's original purpose for the people of Israel. Well, Ezekiel 16 talks about just how far they'd gotten from that. And then Ezekiel 43, Ezekiel has this vision of God returning to his people, returning to this temple. And he spells it out in such detail that everybody knew this prophecy. In fact, this prophecy was so well known that in around 1540 AD, there was a sultan from the Ottoman Empire, and he actually sealed this particular gate that Ezekiel talks about with 16 feet of concrete to keep the Jewish Messiah from returning. 16 feet of concrete, it's still sealed today. The vision Ezekiel talks about in Ezekiel 43, he says, the vision I saw of the glory of God coming back, the glory of God returning to Israel, it was just like the vision I'd seen when God left the city. Super fascinating. And so when Jesus lines up with the east gate on the Mount of Olives, Mark is telling us, look, Jesus knew about that prophecy, and he's setting himself up to fulfill that prophecy. I am amazed by that. I think that's amazing. What makes it really stand out to me is just days before, in Mark chapter 10. So Mark 11, Jesus is starting to position himself towards Palm Sunday. But in Mark chapter 10, 2 days before, a blind man calls Jesus, Son of David, Son of David, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus generally, in the book of Mark at least, Jesus kind of stays away from those titles. He doesn't refer to himself as Lord. He's playing it pretty chill and keeping things on the DL. But he turns to this blind man who says, Son of David. And he says, yes. He responds, yeah, that's me. I'm that guy. So he lines himself up with the east gate of Bethany, responds to Son of David. And then Mark picks this story up, Mark 11, as they approached Jerusalem, and they came to Bethany at the Mount of Olives. This is that story where Jesus sent some disciples to go find this colt, this donkey. I think it's Mark, it's verse 2 here where he says, go, and he describes in detail, you're going to find a colt tied there. Nobody's ever ridden this colt. Untie it, bring it here. And then the highlight of this whole verse is, if anyone asks you why you're doing this, you just tell them, the Lord needs it. Again, Jesus doesn't refer to himself this way in the book of Mark, hardly ever. So all of a sudden, the people around him, their radars are up, and they're like, yo, what is going on? Like, he's lining up with this particular gate that the glory of God is supposedly going to come back into the city, back into the village through. He's now... When somebody said, hey, Son of David, he said yes. And now all of a sudden he's saying, go find this animal and tell him the Lord needs it. You know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they all report this event, this particular prophecy, because what he's doing, once again, he's setting himself up to fulfill prophecy. He knows this prophecy from Zechariah about a king, a humble king, just and having salvation, lowly and humble, this king that's going to come in to visit his people, and he'll be on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So Jesus knows this. His friends know this. This is like the fourth or fifth thing in a row that he lines up to say something significant is happening. You know, the Gospel of John only shares about 10% of material with Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So whenever there's something in John that's also in the other three Gospels, my eyes open up a little bit wider. My ears tune in a little bit. So Jesus is saying to his people, to his friends and his followers leading up to Palm Sunday, he's saying, it's on. It's on. The glory of God has returned. The Lord is coming, the Son of David. And he's starting to walk into these prophecies. He's starting to fulfill these things. This is really as far as I want to go today. I just want to take a minute, and then I want to ask this question. What should have happened? What should have happened when Jesus starts fulfilling prophecy, when he starts announcing for really the first time in the book of Mark? I mean, there's been some, Mark announces from the very beginning, and then Mark 8 is one of the highlights where Jesus says, hey, what are people saying about me? Who do people think I am? But this is the first time that over and over and over, Jesus is like, all right, it's on. I'm coming into the city through the east gate. It's my goats in the background. I'm coming into the city through the east gate. I'm riding on a donkey, riding on this little baby donkey. You know, his disciples, Matthew tells us, they actually brought two donkeys. He asked for one, but they brought two, and they brought a big donkey and a baby donkey, and Jesus is like, yeah, I'll take the little guy. I kind of like him. He's cute. So here he comes. He's riding into the city through the right gate on the right animal. He's responding to the right title. What should people have done? How should people have responded? And then I want to say to us today, if you see God setting things up, if you see God moving things in your life, or maybe even just stepping into a certain role in your life, how do you respond leading up to Palm Sunday? Leading up to this Sunday where we celebrate, where Jesus rides in, should have been received as a king. How should we respond? And how do we respond? Thanks, guys. I hope you can at least hear the goats. They're back there somewhere, and there's chickens running around, filming live from our barn on a beautiful day here in Salt Lake City. Hope all is well. Cheers.